And here we go. We have liftoff.
Propulsion continues to be nominal.
RCPA chamber pressure looks good.
Following up. Roger, roll, Atlantis.
Water towers, fly! Yes!
Tango down to nominal.
Flight downside FD off. Bring in FD off. Off. It's orange!
R25! Oh my god! Oh my god!
Decollage.
Put that in the big bag, Signal.
343 unfolds to go.
Indeed.
We rise together, back to the moon and beyond.
This methane will be igniting in the flare, correct?
Yikes. You good? Sure. We don't need any more of these.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to what will hopefully be our live coverage of the Astra 1P/SES-24 mission, which is scheduled to lift off in just over 50 minutes. This is, of course, the mission that has had a few delays already due to weather, but we will get into that. I see all your 5x5s in chat. Thank you very much for that. I'll be your host for today's mission, Trevor Sesnick, a writer here at NSF, but thankfully, I am not alone. Joining me today is Alex. Alex, how you doing?
I'm doing fantastic. Hopefully today is the day that this mission gets off the ground and we get a launch out of the Cape finally after so many days. At
Yeah.
least, you know, we had the other day a Falcon 9 launch finally, but it was from Edinburgh. Now it needs to happen from here from the Cape.
Yeah. Then joining us from the field is Julia Bergeron. Julia, how's it going today?
Well, good evening. It is going well.
And it looks like Julia may be a bit
Um,
robotic, so we'll try to work on her signal. But with that, Alex, can you give us an overview of what we're hoping to see launched today?
Yeah, so today it's number 2 attempt, right, for this very peculiar satellite. It is an SES satellite, is the SES-24 satellite, also known as the Astra 1P satellite. That is the main payload and the only payload that we know of for today's launch. It is going to a geosynchronous transfer orbit, that is an egg-shaped kind of orbit with a perigee close to Earth, around 200-300 kilometers. But then the apogee is either slightly below, at, or above the geostationary belt. And so this satellite is going to be delivering TV services for Europe, mainly Germany, France, and Spain. So as I said on the first attempt, my brother, for example, uses these Astra TV services, and so, you know, he's going to have another satellite to be able to choose and watch TV. So as you can see there on your screen, that's from the Next Spaceflight app or website. In that case, it's the website. And so today's mission is heading straight east out of the Cape. It is launching with booster B1080. It's going to be the 9th launch of that booster. It essentially supported Axiom 2, Euclid, Starlink 611, Starlink 624, Axiom 3, CRS-30, Starlink 652, and Starlink 662 most recently, about 28 days ago. So hopefully we get finally that launch of that rocket today. As you know, as we were mentioning before, this launch was supposed to happen 2 days ago, but unfortunately the weather did not play nice. We had on board around T-7.5 minutes or so. You know, they were already into that propellant load sequence and everything. Was quite a shame. So hopefully today we actually get through all of that and more. Of course, the booster, you know, it's reusable. It's landing on just read the instructions, about 648 kilometers downrange, out to the east. Again, this is a geosynchronous transfer orbit, so they always launch to the east for those missions. Just like, for example, next week, we're going to have the Ghost U launch on a Falcon Heavy. If you if you're following along and everything, that's also a geosynchronous orbit that they're going to be targeting. And so that's also going to be launching east, but instead of a Falcon 9, it is going on a Falcon Heavy. Hopefully we get that as well in the next few days.
Yeah, but it's certainly been a little bit weird since the last launch from the Cape was Starlink Group 10-1, which was on June 8th UTC. So it's been, what, like 11 days since that launch, which is a long time for SpaceX to not go without launching.
Yeah, if they
And
launch today on time, it will be a 12.8 day turnaround. For this pad, which is also the same for like Florida launches for SpaceX overall.
yeah, and Alex pointed out an interesting stat about this on X yesterday, where between 10-1 and today's mission, there were two launches from from Vandenberg. So I think that was Alex. You were saying that was the first time there were ever two back-to-back SpaceX launches from Vandenberg without a Cape launch in between. Correct?
Yeah, that is correct. We have always had, when they've launched from Vandenberg, we've always had in between the next Vandenberg launch, we've always had something either from 39A, from 40, from both, like multiple launches in between, but at least one launch always happening there from the Cape. But this time around, it actually happened back to back, and I think it was actually worldwide. Like, if you count all of the launches throughout the world, it was also back to back from Vandenberg because there were no
Wow.
launches in between. I believe. So yeah. And now
There
we
was
had
that.
earlier today the Rocket Lab launch, so that's nice. Another launch that is not from the US.
Wasn't there a suborbital Minotaur launch from Vandenberg too
Yeah,
in between?
there were a few suborbital launches in between, but yeah, suborbital. Who
Yeah.
cares? Nah, they're cool, but missile launches are very often these days, unfortunately.
Yeah. But I think we have Julia back. Julia, how are you doing? Can you give us an overview on how the weather is at the Cape?
I can give you an overview. It is a little bit less cloudy than last time, and the sky is lacking those clouds that we get concerned about for weather rules. You may hear on my feed, it is a little breezy, but within limits so far, so that's good. And it's warm. It's warm here. Tropical, indeed.
Awesome. Then I also forgot earlier to mention that Dee is out in the field bringing us these awesome views, and then also Carson is behind the scenes operating today's stream. So sorry for forgetting y'all at the start. Anyway, going into some of your guys' questions, reminder, if you have any questions, make sure you tag us in chat with the @NASA Spaceflight, and we will try our best to get through as many of them as we can in the coming, 45 minutes or so until launch. Starting off with a regular, Musical Wolves is wondering if there are more delays today, will SpaceX hold off on another Starlink launch from the Cape? So, Alex, what is aside from the Falcon Heavy next week, what does the Cape manifest look like?
Well, right now we have a launch potential. So we have today's launch, right? Then the next launch after this should be on the 23rd. That should be 1:03 p.m. Eastern, if there's no delays or anything. And then from the Cape after that, we're gonna have the Ghost U Falcon Heavy launch. However, in between, there might be a Vandenberg launch for Falcon 9 for SpaceX, essentially. The Starlink Group 9-2 mission out from Vandenberg currently scheduled also on the 23rd, late at night for them. There you can see the sort of manifest that we are looking here at for the next few days. So there you can see the next launch after today, 10-2, on the 23rd at 1:03 p.m. Eastern time. Then on the 23rd also, but at night, we're gonna have another Falcon 9, hopefully from Vandenberg. And then on Tuesday, on January 25th, we're gonna have that Falcon Heavy with GoSU. Then after that, there's also another launch. It's not entirely there, but there are already NOTAMs, notice to our mission, for the reentry of the second stage for Starlink Group 8-9 and 10-3. One from, so both will be from the Cape, and I expect that perhaps 8-9 will be on the 26th and 10-3 will be probably on the 30th, maybe already going into July. But that's sort of the expected outlook for the next few days. Now, what will happen if today's mission were to delay? Well, tomorrow we'll have much better weather. So today's weather forecast is 60% go at the beginning of the window. So hopefully, if they go towards the beginning, that's going to be much better weather than previous times. But if they delay into the window, we're going to get all the way to just 40% go towards the end of the window, because there's a system that it's coming through, and that is essentially going to be going through the Space Coast over the evening and during the night. Fortunately, tomorrow, if they actually delay today for whatever reason, tomorrow's weather is going to be a lot better. It's going to be 80% go. There you can see that's the probability of violating weather constraints. So you have to read it backwards, essentially 100% minus whatever it is displayed there. So for go conditions, tomorrow it will be 80% go. Much better weather conditions, essentially. Which means perhaps all of these launches that I've just mentioned, except for the Falcon Heavy launch, will probably delay by 1 day. So if this delays by 1 day, the others will delay by 1 day, except the Falcon Heavy and the Vandenberg launch, because they don't share the same launch pad. But the other three that I mentioned, they are from the same launch pad. They are going to be from here, from Sleek 40. So they're, they will delay about the same kind of 1 day if they delay today's mission. We'll see.
Yeah, that just goes to show kind of how absurd SpaceX's cadence is, where it really is a one-to-one delay for any time they have it to stand down from an opportunity, whether it's hardware or weather. They're pretty much pushing their entire manifest back a single day. But with that, I think it's an interesting conversation to think about how are we looking for the 148 launch goal at this point, Alex, since they haven't been able to reach the launch cadence they may have wanted to this month due to weather and technical problems on Starlink Group 10-2. But are they still looking good to reach that 12-13 launch goal this month?
Well, right now, so this month, if they pull off very crazy turnaround times, they may get 12, maybe 13 Falcon 9 launches, plus the Starship launch, then that will mean 13, 14 total. Either way, something that is above 10, I think it's recoverable. Right now, they are in such a cadence that they will need 13 launches every single month from here on, right? So if they get 10 launches this month, let's say, in a bad mood situation kind of thing, they only get 10. And that's crazy that saying only 10. But, that's now for SpaceX, that will be a very bad month, right? 10 launches only. Those 3 launches that remain then will have to be shared among the 6 months that are left in the year. So if you think about it, it's like 1 launch every 2 months. You have to add another one of these launches. It's not really that big of a deal. They have already demonstrated 13 launches, almost 14 in a month previously, right? So they can do that if they have everything at their favor. Of course, June seems to have been one of those months where things were not in their favor. But, cross your fingers, knock wood, whatever rituals you have for good luck, maybe they can get through that in later months. I know that, the tropical storm season and hurricane season is still ongoing. It's not going to stop after June. It's actually the start of the season right now, right? So we're going to get more months
I was
where
just going to
weather.
say, Alex.
Exactly. So we're going to get a few more months where, the weather is probably not going to cooperate. But, thankfully, they still have October, November, and December. If we don't get like a 2020 situation where we had even a hurricane all the way to December 31st, then, we're gonna be good.
I was gonna say now, Alex, remember October is still hurricane season, so
Yeah, and
they have November and December.
I still remember a few years ago, I think it was 2020, where they had like a hurricane on December 30th, 31st, or something like that. It's like, why?
Yeah.
And it didn't pass through Florida, but it was still like a hurricane in the middle of the Atlantic that was forming, and it was like, wow, it's December 30th, it's New Year's Eve, essentially.
The longest hurricane season ever. But hey, you know
Yeah.
what? On that note, like you said, it is the beginning of hurricane season, but it is also the first day of summer. So happy solstice to anybody who
Oh,
celebrates. And
yeah.
maybe this would be a good time to knock on wood and do some blessings so that we do have a successful, less tropical season than I think is coming toward us.
Yeah, we're already 8 minutes into the summer. If I did my math correctly, it's already 8 minutes.
Anyway, Alex, now that we are under that T minus 38-minute mark where they will have started the go no go poll for propellant loading, could you take us through what we're expecting to see in the next 20 minutes or so?
Yeah, so right now we are obviously waiting for SpaceX to go into propellant load. We don't know right now if they have actually given the go to proceed with that propellant load. We usually either wait for a confirmation from SpaceX on social media, or we start seeing the booster being frosty. That usually occurs a few minutes into that propellant load, which will start in about a minute or so. That is an automated launch countdown sequence. Once T minus 35 minutes is hit on the countdown, that process begins automatically, and they start essentially with the first stage. They load both propellants, RP1 and liquid oxygen, and the second stage starts the RP1. The RP1 load on the second stage will go all the way to about T minus 20 minutes in the count, and then they'll prepare for that liquid oxygen load through that T minus 20 minute event that we usually see, cooling down, chilling down those lines that go to the second stage for the liquid oxygen load, and then that liquid oxygen load will happen about 4 minutes later at T minus 16 minutes. So that's essentially more or less the next 20 minutes in the count. Let's hope that they actually go through that T minus 35 minute launch auto sequence point, and they go through the propellant load.
Right. But we will not be scrubbing our members, which a bunch of them have joined. So I want to quickly thank all of those. That was a really bad transition. I'm sorry. Um, oh, actually, we just got
There we
confirmation
go.
from SpaceX that all systems are looking good for today's launch of SES satellites. Propellant load is underway, and weather is currently favorable for liftoff. That's what we want to hear.
Nice.
Anyway, to members, Dan became a PadRed member, Carl became a PadRed member, and Bettina became a Red Team member. Tail MD became a Capcom member. Welcome to our Discord. And Telstar86 gifted a Red Team membership. So thank you all very much for your support. If you joined the Discord, make sure you come have fun with us, tag Jack in some bacon related post or whatever. But it's a fun place, so come hang out. Um, anyway, back to some of your guys' questions. Um, Abacus Man is wondering, can you clarify for viewers how the name of the satellite is Astra, and that's different from the rocket company? And then related to that, Alex, 98 Central is wondering, is Astra only for television broadcast, or are there other instruments on board? So can you just kind of take us through the confusing naming scheme?
Yeah, so this is something that we sort of tackled on the first attempt, and I guess it's again time to talk about that. So yeah, it is essentially, these Astra TV services. It predates, like, for many years, what the launch company also of the same name. Astra is such a it's essentially, I think it's the name for star in Latin or something like that. So obviously, it's very common to see that name in spaceflight in general. But yeah, these satellites, these Astra satellites, are essentially for TV services. I'm not sure if they have anything else, but yeah, it's essentially for TV services, and this one in particular, we explained this before that usually these satellites have like different names because there's like different reasons for that. Today's mission, the satellite, it's also SES-24 because it's SES's 24th geostationary satellite. We also mentioned in the past that Falcon 9 has launched many SES satellites as well. SES-8 was the first commercial satellite to launch on a Falcon 9. That was to geostationary transfer orbit as well. It was the first time a Falcon 9 carried anything to geostationary transfer orbit. There's also being SES-10. It was the first mission that featured a reused booster, a reused Falcon 9 booster. There's been many missions for SES, including also for the medium Earth orbit constellation that SES has, which is O3b and Power. So those satellites have also launched on Falcon 9. Future satellites for that constellation will also launch on Falcon 9. And so, yeah, you see, for example, SES-11 was also known as EchoStar 105 because that satellite, for example, had transponders for SES and it also had transponders for EchoStar. There were also the SES-16 satellite was also named GovSat-1 because it was part of it was like essentially a government satellite for Luxembourg. So it was like the first GovSat, so to speak, government satellite, so to speak. Yeah, that was the reason for the two names. Today's satellite, the reason for the two names, it's part of the Astra constellation of TV satellites, but also the 24th geostationary satellite for SES. So that's why it has these two names as well. And yeah, this is very common sometimes on these kind of satellites when you either have two different naming conventions or two different customers that use the same satellite, and so they share the payload and things like that. So yeah, it's not uncommon to see this kind of thing.
Yeah, it certainly threw me off when I first saw it on Next Spaceflight, and I was like, "Wait, Astra has a launch? Oh, wait, no, it's just a Falcon 9 launching a satellite."
Yeah.
Um, Here's one for you, Julia. Jeff is wondering what direction will the rocket be headed on today's mission?
Oh, that's a good question. And geostationary, it is going straight out east from clear in Orlando. You're going to see it.
Looks like we have a slightly robotic Julia again, but she was saying due east, and if you're in Orlando, you may be able to see it along with other places right by the Space Coast. So yeah.
I may deal with one thing because I'm seeing people asking me in chat if I'm watching football. I'm not watching football. I'm not a huge fan. Like I usually sometimes watch it, but I'm not a huge fan. Ironically, I'm mostly sure that my brother, who's using one of these Astra satellites, is probably watching those through TV.
Yeah, I have not been watching, but apparently Spain won, so go Spain.
Ugh.
Um, Here's an interesting question. Jake is wondering, how does the Falcon 9 reach low Earth orbit? So can you use this question as a way to just kind of explain what mission profile we're seeing today, the landing burns, and then also what the rocket needs to do to get these satellites into orbit, Alex?
Yeah, so essentially, it has two stages. The first stage puts the second stage and the payload into almost, into almost space and to about 2,000 kilometers, not 2,000 kilometers, excuse me, 2,000 meters per second of speed. Then the booster on its own, then it uses, its grid fins and it does an entry burn and a landing burn to be able to land on a drone ship out at sea. The entry burn is done in a 1-3-1 fashion. It ignites the center engine, then two other engines ignite to slow down through the reentry. That's usually what we call, fighting fire with fire. That, it not only slows down the booster for the reentry, but it also protects it from the heating and forces of the reentry, because that engine exhaust pushes away that air away from the booster, and so it protects it. On the other hand, the landing burn is with one single engine, uses landing legs and everything to be able to land softly on the deck of the drone ship. The drone ship then comes back with the booster and it gets reused. The second stage, meanwhile, while the booster is landing and everything, it fires its single Merlin vacuum engine. It deploys the fairings once it's completely out of the thickest part of the atmosphere and it's in near vacuum, right? They are not needed. Those fairing halves will be essentially re-entering. They use RCS thrusters, cold gas thrusters, to be able to control their attitude after separation, and so they use the sort of rounded portion of them, sort of like Starship, if you will. They face that rounded portion against the trajectory, so they can get through the atmosphere and slow down. Then pop out a parachute. They splash down in the ocean. They get recovered. Today's mission, they are going to be recovered by Bob. That's going to be the fairing recovery vessel for today. And so then the second stage will continue firing that MVAC engine, and then it reaches a low Earth orbit first for this mission, and then it'll burn again, reaching geostationary transfer orbit. In order to reach low Earth orbit, you need to get very, very fast. For a typical Starlink mission, it's about 27,000 kilometers per hour. It kind of depends on what your low Earth orbit is going to be. To today's mission, it's probably going to be 27,500, maybe 28,000 kilometers per hour, which translates to about 7.8 kilometers per second. So it's very, very fast. The booster does some of the job, but the great majority of the work is by the second stage. And obviously, then to get into geostationary transfer orbit, you need to push another 2.5 kilometers per second, reaching about 9.8 kilometers per second or so to get into that egg-shaped orbit. But that's more or less the steps for a typical Falcon 9 mission to get into orbit. And today's orbit is, they have another step. It's not just low Earth orbit, but then there's another burn that puts the satellite into that geosynchronous transfer orbit.
Wow, great explanation. Thank you. Load Runner is wondering how many Falcon 9 launches do they have so far this year? This will be the 62nd mission for SpaceX in 2024, and all of those have been Falcon 9. And then, of course, they had those two Starship launches so far. So
Yep.
they're at 64 total launches, 62 of which have been Falcon. To some support, Coco Cats, a regular around here, gifted a Red Team membership. Then Ninja Decimator gifted 5. So if you got one of those, make sure you thank either Ninja Decimator or Coco Cats. It's always very much appreciated, and we hope you guys enjoy the membership program we have. Then Daniel with the super chat is wondering, any ideas when we will see the first Crew Dragon launch from Slick 40? Yes, we do have an idea. The Polaris Dawn mission is going to launch from Slick 40, and that is currently scheduled for July 12th. So we're, about 3 weeks away from seeing the first Crew Dragon launch out of Slick 40, which will be exciting. And then Black Hawk NZ gifted another 5 Red Team memberships. So thank you for your support, Blackhawks. Here's an interesting question from Sonia, asking, aside from the cost, would it be possible to use T-TEP and liquid oxygen as a rocket propellant? Alex, take us through why that may or may not make sense.
People are calling you out because you didn't do the pew pew pew. But anyways, it's not really that efficient. I know that at least like I've seen certain sounding rockets, or even small sat, not small sat, but like really small rockets, I've seen them use TTEB as part of the propellants, right? Not just for igniting the engine, but also just to run the engine, which is crazy because then you see the exhaust is just pure green, and you think that it's copper melting or something like that. No, it's actually the engine, how it runs. Um, I mean, it could be possible. It's just very inefficient, right? And also, as the comment is saying, will be very cost prohibitive because I believe Tito is not that cheap.
Yeah, didn't Elon say several, I don't, maybe years ago at this point, that the most expensive part of Falcon 9 launches is the helium and T-Tab, and that the RP-1 and liquid oxygen is pretty cheap.
Yeah,
Anyway,
it's not very economical, and also it will probably not be very efficient. It's not an efficient propellant.
yeah, you generally want to minimize the mass of each atom in your exhaust, and I
Hmm.
don't think the T-Tab combustion reaction leads to that light of atoms in it, or molecules, I guess. Anyway, uh, Canon is asking, are there plans for Falcon Heavy at any of SpaceX's other pads, Slick 4E, Slick 40, or Slick 6?
Well, Slick 6 may have a Falcon Heavy configuration, but so far it's not been like it's still undergoing the usual paperwork and everything. We haven't really seen any work tearing down structures and building out new stuff or anything like it. But we're gonna keep looking and see what happens.
Right. Yeah, we haven't seen or heard much about that pad. But we are, like Alex said, expecting it to start, for SpaceX to start work on it sooner than later. They'll need it if they want to continue increasing launch cadence. Um, but even though we haven't seen work there, we are about to see the T minus 20-minute vent. So if you pay attention to the TE, that gray structure that's right in front of the vehicle from this perspective, not one of the four lightning towers, but right next to the vehicle, that is the transporter erector. And right on schedule, you see that venting coming from it. Alex, what is this venting that we are seeing?
Yeah, as we were going through the countdown before, this is essentially the start of the chill down. So they have completed the RP1 load on the second stage, and then what they do is they chill down the other line, essentially the one that is used for the liquid oxygen load, onto the second stage, precisely to prepare it for that. That should happen in about 4 minutes from now, T minus 16 minutes, and that second stage lux load, it's essentially a very cold liquid, right? That liquid oxygen, so it needs to condition that. We talk about the same thing, for example, for Falcon 9 engine chill, as you can see there, that other line right below the stage 2 liquid oxygen load beginning. That'll be pretty much the same. The Merlin engine uses liquid oxygen, so therefore it needs to get conditioned for that ignition process well ahead of that happening. So we're not able to see the engine chill actually happening, but we know it happens. We can see it though for Raptor when it happens because there's these sort of vents and everything that happen when they actually chill down the engines there. Falcon 9 has a very similar thing on the Octaweb. Unfortunately, you need a camera looking at the Octaweb to see the engine chill vents for the Merlin engines. And well, let's say that SpaceX hasn't granted that kind of access just yet.
Yeah, that is one of the really cool shots that we get on Starship launches, is the view right up looking at all 33 of
Yeah.
those Raptors. Um, watching the gimbal test, watching the venting. Oh, it is so cool. Um, Musical Wolves in a $5 super chat is wondering, is the 20-minute vent able to press like the button as it vents? Able to press the Oh, the like, wow, I misread that. Is the 20-minute vent able to press the like button as it vents? I think so. That's a good reminder as always. If you haven't clicked the like button, please do. It's free and it does help us out tremendously. Shows the YouTube algorithm that our stuff is worth watching and hopefully suggesting it to new people. So it's free, please do it. But either way, thank you all for being here. And then Paul in a super chat saying, what was the growling sound I heard on Starship Flight 4? I did not hear that on flights 1 through 3. Alex, do you know what Paul is alluding to?
Not sure. Maybe they can type it like a regular comment or something, because I'm not sure what sort of growling noise. I mean, Starship is very noisy, right? And it makes lots of sounds. So I'm not sure what kind of sound, at what moment, um, they're referring to. But yeah, that's a lot of noises that it makes. It's a very powerful rocket.
Yeah, make sure, like Alex said, just tag us in chat with what you mean, and we can. He says on takeoff. Yeah,
On
I'm not.
takeoff. Well, the engines, right? I think someone else is also referring to the igniters going off. There was like these sounds of phew, like I don't know how to explain it, but it's essentially the igniters starting up on the engines. You can hear three of them. That's the three banks that they ignite for the engine ignition. So there's like 1, 2, and 3. The first bank is the center engines, all 13 of them. Then the next is 15 outer engines, and then another 5 get ignited. So they have 3 banks of engines, and what you hear, that high pitched noise, is those igniters going off as the engines start up. It's very, very, very cool, I should say. We hear that normally when they do it. Like I think we even heard it for Ship 29. Sometimes they test those igniters independently without igniting the engine, and so we can hear those high-pitched noises when the igniters go off.
Right. I can certainly tell you, right, Flight 4 was the first launch I was able to hear. I certainly didn't really see it, but the sound in person was
Yeah.
just insane. It just rattles your whole chest. And I heard that, I think maybe it was D or Jack was saying that that was either the best or second best launch audio they have heard from a launch. So even though we weren't able to see it, at least we got really good audio from it.
Yeah, and also for example, I was just mentioning that we heard Ship 29, and the reason why we know that they did an igniter test on Ship 29 is because on Ship 29 they only ignite 2 times. So they have the vacuum engines and the center engines. Whereas the booster, they have 3 banks of engines. They have explained this, and I've told right now, right? The center 13 engines, then 15 on the outer, and then another 5 on the outer for a total of 33 engines. So they have 3. When you hear it and it's 3 igniters, back to back, that's the booster. But if it's 2, that's most likely the ship. And so it's very cool when you hear that high pitch, view going on. I don't know how to say. I guess that's what you say when Ninja Decimator is going out, right? With some support, but yeah, we should use that sound for when we talk about him.
Yeah. So hopefully that somewhat answers your question, Paul, but sorry that neither of us super know exactly what you're alluding to. Um, Joe Howard gifted 5 Red Team memberships. Thank you very much, Joe. And then a $10 super chat saying, bless you for being so comfortable explaining the process for newbies. You guys are really special. Well, thank you very much for the kind words, Roseanne. It really does mean the world to us, and it's our pleasure to be able to talk about rocket launches for you guys. So thank you, everyone, for tuning in. Another regular is wondering what happened to the Falcon 9 landings in the Bahamas. Alex, what is going on with that now that we're seeing the Starlink missions go toward the northeast as opposed to the
Hmm.
southeast?
Well, for now, they're just essentially doing these missions to the northeast. Um, we don't really know what happened with those on the Bahamas, but it could be down to performance, to anything related with like the distance to the port and things like that. We We certainly don't know. It will be interesting, sometimes we get some tidbits of information from Kiko or John Edwards, right? Maybe we get something like that in the future, but for now they're doing these northeast launches, and unfortunately we don't really have a lot of insight into why they haven't really done those, exuma landings as they were called.
Mhm.
These northeast launches could easily be done as well, doing those landings on Exuma, but they prefer to go northeast.
Awesome. And in the middle of that explanation, Phil gifted 20 Red Team memberships, and I saw a bunch of the regulars in chat got one of those, like Musical Wolves and whatnot. So, um, Phil, thank you very much for that
And
very generous support.
and just to be clear, because a lot of people are probably joining because we are like towards the end of the count. We were talking about Starlink launches here, about northeast and southeast and whatnot. Today's mission is going straight to the east. Just to be clear, because maybe people are gonna get confused about that talk.
Yeah, good clarification. But Phil, thank you very much, and thank you everyone for thanking him in chat. That really is awesome. Anyway, now that we have just over 10 minutes until launch, we'll continue going over some of your guys' questions, but there are a few events that will be starting in the coming minutes. The first will be the strong back retract, and then a little bit before that, there will be the engine chill um, on the first stage that Alex was talking about earlier. So, like he was saying, we probably won't be able to see the engine chill vents. However, we will be able to see that strong back tilt back by approximately 1.8 degrees. And then, of course, after the vehicle lifts off, it will swing back even further to past 45 degrees. So, keep your eye out for all of that. Um, Load Runner is wondering what happens to the second stage after payload separation. Does it do a burn to re-enter? Normally, yes, but not on today's mission. So, Alex, could you take us through some of the considerations that SpaceX goes through of when they're able to do a deorbit burn and what calculus is involved in that?
Yeah, generally, if the mission is to low Earth orbit, like a rule of thumb is if the mission is going to low Earth orbit, then it can re-enter. It can do that deorbit burn. It can have some leftover propellant to be able to do that. However, for missions like today, which are higher than LEO, it's going to a geosynchronous transfer orbit. It will not have enough performance. And in fact, because they already expect the second stage to not have that performance, they burn almost to depletion that second stage. They try to squeeze as much performance out of that second stage as they can to put that satellite into a lower inclination orbit, a higher apogee, higher, that highest point in that orbit, that egg-shaped orbit. So that's essentially what they do for missions like today. So what will happen after the payload deployment, that second stage will be in a very similar orbit as the payload. The payload on its own, it has electric thrusters. It will take a few months to get to its final position in geostationary Earth orbit. Once it gets there, it will operate and everything. The second stage will have that egg-shaped orbit, which means on its perigee it'll cross through low Earth orbit, and so it will get atmospheric drag, and that means it'll decay that orbit and eventually re-enter after many months, potentially a few years from now. So it is true that it'll be space junk, but these missions are not very common, right? SpaceX missions are usually, the majority of them are Starlink missions. Those do the orbit the second stage because it's a low Earth orbit. They have that performance available for the orbiting the second stage. But, some missions like today do not have that kind of luck. Once every now and then, it doesn't do that much harm.
Yeah, very true. Um, Then Andy's dad with a $50 super chat saying, "Hey guys, a little cash for Jack's camera needs. I love his pictures." We certainly do too. His photos, the photos from both him and Max from the Electron launch earlier today were just phenomenal. I can't wait to see more of their remotes and all of that. But I know Jack will appreciate the kind words, and we really appreciate the support. So thank you, Andy's dad. And then Philip saying, any updates on Axiom 4? Any crew announcement on the horizon?
Well, I think we know at least the commander, right? That's gonna be Peggy Whitson. I cannot wait to see her again in orbit. I believe there's also gonna be potentially yeah, the problem is some of the crew is like maybe going or not. I believe there's another Turkish astronaut going up, and maybe I think it was Polish or something like that. It's from Europe, but I cannot remember exactly right now the country. I'm sorry. And I'm from Spain. I should know it, right? Because I'm from Europe, so I should know the countries in Europe. But I cannot remember exactly right now which country. I think it's from Europe. Anyways, we know at least maybe 3 of the crew members. I don't think we know the entirety of the crew members, and it's still not officially announced. You know what I mean, right? When they pull out this press release of these are all the crew members, and this is the commander, and this is the the pilot and whatnot, right? So it's still not officially official.
Right. Let's see. So I've seen a bunch of questions about this. On the left of the screen, there are those 2 large spheres, and people are wondering, do we know what those are for? Like some kind of Doppler system, Alex?
Yeah, I believe they are for radar. Um, they have lots of different things there for tracking the rocket and things like that. But I think those are legacy tracking domes. I'm not fully sure though. But they do have a lot of these sort of older systems. That is essentially next to SpaceX's payload processing facility at the Cape. So they have 2 main locations for processing payloads, which is the building right next to these 2 spheres, and that is essentially the old processing facility for like Titans and things like that back in the day. And then they also have now Hangar X2 at Roberts Road, where they put all the Starlink payloads and things like that. Additionally, some of the payloads are also integrated at Astra Tech in Titusville, but those are usually like government payloads or things like that.
Right. Cool. Yeah, Julia in the back channel saying she also thinks their legacy possibly the Space Force. So we're not
Yeah.
100% sure, but um, the experts have spoken. And then Blake gifted a red team membership, so thank you very much, Blake. We are under 5 minutes from launch now, so I guess let's quickly go over what events we will be seeing in the next few minutes. We will be seeing another vent from the TE. Alex, can you kind of take us through what that vent means and what other fueling events are wrapping up during this time?
Yeah, so we are essentially in the process of the final few minutes here of the propellant load sequence. The Stromback is in the process of retracting. That top clamp has opened, and now that Stromback retracts about 1.8 degrees and or 1.2. I don't remember right now, but anyways, it's about a degree or so that it retracts. It clears the way for the rocket to eventually lift off, and at liftoff, it pulls out completely. But we are essentially in that final few minutes of the propellant load sequence. Next should be stage 1 LUX load being completed, and then stage 2. So once we have that, we have a fully loaded Falcon 9. Then the ground computers will hand over control of the countdown to the onboard computers on Falcon 9. That'll be at T-1 minute. That's when it's called Falcon 9 is in startup. And that's also when they do all of the pre-launch checks, the automated countdown. Essentially, all of those computers start doing pre-launch checks, and they pressurize the tanks for launch and everything. And hopefully a few seconds later, we get that go for launch from the launch director. So hopefully we'll get to that in just 2 minutes from now.
Right. And I've seen some questions about the fairings on today's mission, and we did learn the other day that both of these are flight proven. I believe one is flying for the sixth time, and the other is flying for the third, if I remember correctly. So
Seventh.
seventh, okay, six and
Yep.
seven, yeah.
6 and 7.
So pretty young fairings in the grand scheme of things. Now that they've had uh, fairings fly up to is it 15 or 16 times that we know of?
I believe up to 16 is the publicly released information. Yeah.
Yeah, who knows if it's more than that? They've not been the best of sharing that info, but they did share the other day that fairings had a fairing turnaround time of like just over 2 weeks or something like that. So fairing recovery is definitely going well. And as Alex said, both of these fairings will be recovered on today's mission by Bob. But with that, just
Oh,
over a minute.
looks like there you can see that vent from the Stromback. That is indication that stage 2 LUX load is complete, and therefore Falcon 9 is fully loaded.
Awesome. Just about 20 seconds until Alex, or as Alex mentioned, the vehicle will enter startup and begin pressurizing its tanks for flight. So that means to ensure that they're rigid for when those 9 Merlin engines ignite, you want that to be fairly high pressure. I believe Falcon 9 tanks are around 3 bar, which is substantially lower than like Starships, but still quite high. And with that, the vehicle now should be in startup mode. So it has taken control of the launch countdown from ground computers onto computers on board the vehicle. And any second now, we should be getting a verification from the launch director that they are go for today's launch.
They are go for launch.
And there it is. T minus 30 seconds, SpaceX saying that the weather is looking good. So let's cross our fingers that SpaceX is able to get a rocket launch out of Florida. Pay attention to the base of the vehicle. We may be able to see a little bit of a flash when the engines ignite at T minus 2.7 seconds before all of the
Oh, there's the
vapor.
deluge.
And there's And there we have liftoff of the Astra 1P/SES-24 mission. We will now remain quiet so you can enjoy the launch audio. And there we have it. That is a successful liftoff of the SES-24 mission. At this point, the vehicle will be passing through max Q, which is when the aerodynamic forces on the vehicle are highest. So as the vehicle starts to accelerate and it starts to go faster, you of course have more pressure. But then as the atmosphere starts to decrease in density, the pressure decreases. So you have this overlap point, which is known as max Q. In just about a minute, at T plus 2 minutes and 31 seconds, we will see 3 events, the first of 3 events in a row, which will be MECO, or cutoff of those 9 Merlin 1D engines that you can see on your screen right now, followed shortly after by stage separation, which is when those 4 pushers will push the 2 stages apart, and then second stage ignition. At that point, as Alex was saying, the vehicles will be on their own trajectories. This point, we can see that plume expanding as the atmosphere gets less dense, and also the color of the plume changing, which I always very much enjoy seeing. About just under 10 seconds until MECO. Of course, there is a cloud on that view, but thankfully this view, and there it is. There is MECO. Now pay attention for the vehicles to separate. And that looks like stage 2 ignition. And there's SpaceX views. You can see that central pusher on the left screen. And then on the right screen, that is stage 2 ignition of that Merlin vacuum engine. Now,
No
Alex,
stiffener ring, and it's a commercial launch. It's a customer launch
yeah. Is this
instead of
the first
Starlink.
customer launch
No,
without a
it's not the
stiffener ring?
first, but it's definitely a trend, right? Um, I think it's probably the third that I've seen so far. But yeah,
Interesting.
right now we are, the second stage is continuing into orbit. We're gonna get that fairing separation really soon as it clears as it gets essentially near vacuum conditions already. And then the booster, meanwhile, it's going through that coast phase. That's the fairing view. A little bit obscured by the payload, but it's okay.
Yeah, it was
As
weird
we
how
get,
late fairing step is on these non-Starlink missions.
yeah, the Starlink missions, they toast a little bit those Starlinks by deploying the fairings a little bit earlier. But yeah, as I was saying, the booster is right now in that sort of almost parabolic trajectory. It is almost on its apogee. It is essentially coasting. It has deployed its grid fins, and now it is orienting itself into an engine's first position for that entry. We're going to get through that entry burn a couple of minutes from now. One engine will ignite first on the center, then another two engines will ignite. Those two engines will, so those three engines as a sort of like a team kind of thing, they're going to be burning for about 20 seconds or so. The other 20, the other, not 20, I'm confusing with the Starship, excuse
Wrong
me.
vehicle.
The other two engines will shut down, then one single engine will burn for just a few more seconds, and then the complete burn will just end with that shutdown of that center engine. For landing burn, a few minutes later after that, we're gonna get just one single engine though. It's been a while since we've had a 131 landing burn, but those are cool. But also put a lot of stresses on the vehicle. I'm mostly sure of that. But yeah, we don't have 20, 33, whatever many engines on super heavy, right? Uh, those are cool too. But you can see sort of the trend, right, of like igniting and shutting down engines and whatnot. It all started with Falcon 9.
Yeah. You can see in the bottom left, the first stage telemetry, the vehicle has passed its apogee and is now on the way down. So you can see the speed going back up, and that will last until what about uh, what altitude do they do the entry burn at? Is it like 50-ish kilometers?
Around
Um,
65, more or less,
okay.
if
Yeah,
I'm
somewhere
not
in the
mistaken.
50 to 60 kilometer range that entry burn will start, and that's when you'll see the speed start rapidly decreasing. But of
Mm,
course, it still has about 20 kilometers, 30 kilometers to fall almost before that burn
yeah.
will begin.
And also, if you can see, so you can see there on that timeline, the landing burn is going to happen after, well, not the landing burn, but like the landing will happen after SECO 1. We're used to Starlink missions being the opposite. They land and then the MVAC engine shuts down. It's going to be the opposite today. There go to Griffins, center engine, and the other
Here are the
two.
two
That's three
sides.
healthy engines.
As Alex said, this burn's expected to last about 20 seconds, but of course that can always change
Hmm.
depending on the vehicle's actual telemetry. Since it's not pre-programmed, it is the vehicle determining when to start and stop that burn, but there's a healthy shutdown of all three of those engines. At this point, as the booster starts going deeper into the atmosphere, those grid fins will start taking control. So you'll see in the upper atmosphere, they primarily use RCS, those pods that you can kind of see between those two grid fins. And then, of course, there's one on the other side of the vehicle. Those have been primarily used to
Look at the
control the
speed.
vehicle's attitude, but
It's
now they
going
will be switching
down.
to those grid fins.
Yeah,
And
now
yeah,
it's steering, trying to align with the drone ship. It doesn't target the drone ship. It targets a little bit of to the side, so to speak. But it needs to get there, right? To near the drone ship. So it kind of glides, tries to glide to that position, and then the landing burn does the rest of the work.
Yeah, and as Alex was saying, the speed decreasing right now is not because of a burn, that is just because of drag in the atmosphere. It's slowing down the vehicle.
Yeah,
But we are coming up on that single engine landing burn, which will happen just about a kilometer above sea level. And that will be the final burn, which will hopefully bring this booster
there goes
to
the
a
landing burn.
soft touchdown on just read the instructions.
And Seco as well,
And there
both
is
at
the
once.
drone ship landing leg deploy and touchdown on just read the instructions, marking SpaceX's 320th booster landing and 246th consecutive, which is just kind of crazy. And with that, as Alex was mentioning, we also had a nominal SECO 1. As a reminder, the second stage will now be doing a long coast for what the coast is approximately 20 minutes before they will do another burn, SES-2, which will last about a minute to raise the apogee, and then from there, uh, the payload will be deployed. So everything looking good so far.
Okie doke.
Anyway,
Well, right now we're in that happy coast phase, right? So it's a pity that they have this thing in between the camera on the front facing camera because the aft facing views are really amazing. Ah, don't tell me. Oh, there we go. They're back. Speaking
and
of being
there we
back,
have Slick 40 with no more
with the
rocket.
strong back.
Yeah. Um,
uh,
as we were talking about earlier, that pad will have another rocket on it very soon. SpaceX is expected to launch the Starlink Group 10-2 mission on Sunday at 13:03 local time, which would be a pretty quick turnaround for Slick 40. Not its quickest, but certainly not slow. And that will hopefully see the Starlink mission, which we saw scrub the other day following engine ignition, getting lifted off. Um, but with that, I want to go back to some of your guys' support to thank people. Daniel with a super chat saying, "Ain't the sea a little rough for landing?" Well, it wasn't. There was a successful landing. Um, Yesterday, SpaceX, well, part of the reason why SpaceX stood down from this launch was because of the weather at both the launch site and the recovery zone. But it seems like the weather cleared up on both of those areas today for them to be able to get this mission off the ground. And then Anan gifted 5 Red Team memberships. So thank you very much. As did Bideford, a regular around here, gifted 5 Red Team memberships. So thank you all very much for the gifts. And uh, if you got one of those, please make sure you thank them in the chat. Um, Alex, I see you have some news.
Well, I mean, if the operator can put it up while we wait for that second stage relight, but if it will be a pity if we could not show it. So I want to make sure that we talk about it and we can show it. Otherwise, yeah. There's a piece of news, let's say, right?
Yeah. I think Carson is working on pulling it up. We're not trying to tease y'all.
I can tease more. I can say that it's Starship related.
Starship. I like Starship.
I mean,
Yes.
to date,
Go
it's not
ahead.
a Starlink launch, but when we actually see Starlink missions being launched and everything, then we get more satellites to get more amazing views from those Starship missions, right? So it's all related. Anyways, trying to make a connection here.
Yeah. Anyway, while we wait for Carson, let's go to some more questions. Here's a good one, sticking with the um, star prefix. They're wondering any updates on Starliner. So we've seen Starliner's undock, descent, and landing has been delayed by a little bit, but do we have any news about what's going on, Alex?
Um, well, the Starliner, they obviously are keeping it a little bit longer on the ISS. It's almost, oh well, now we're showing this. I'll go through the Starliner thing quickly. So it's getting a bit of an extended stay at the ISS just to look through the data a little bit more. It's actually not a big deal because as soon as as long as it is on the ISS, it is safe. All the propulsion systems are saved and everything, and the Euclid system and everything. So it's essentially just like another module attached to the ISS, so to speak. And so it doesn't really do much. Things degrade though, so it's not good to have it for a really, really long period of time, but it's not that big of a deal. So this is the news. The communications permit for Starship's fifth flight is now out. It's not yet granted. It hasn't been approved, but this is the permit that SpaceX is trying to get. This is FCC, just to be clear, Federal Communications Commission, not FAA. This is just for communications. It says at the top, Federal Communications Commission application for special temporary authority. So there you go. But the important thing is what it says in the middle, where it says the first stage booster will either return to the launch site or perform a controlled water landing, right? So they're covering their backs, so to speak, in case they change their minds, and it's not just an RTLS and goes all the way to the chopsticks, but it may change, and the profile may be okay. Well, it does a landing in the water or something like that. But yeah, there's another piece of data, I guess, which is the start of operations, so to speak, which is right below that, which starts on July 19th. So that is the earliest that they could launch, because otherwise it will not be able to communicate with a rocket. So that is essentially what we're looking in terms of Starship news. But that's a little piece of more stuff being put together for that flight.
Yeah, we're still expecting that flight to be several months out, though. I think Elon posted on X saying late July is kind of what they're looking at right
Yep.
now. If Elon is saying that at this point, I think we can probably safely assume August is more likely, if not into September. But um, we'll just have to wait and see. Obviously, the
Also,
changes they're making to ship are quite massive. Replacing 18,000 heat shield tiles will take some time. But
yeah.
as long as we keep seeing them make it further on each of these missions, that's good news.
Also, I don't wanna don't wanna extend a certain thing that I said yesterday on Twitter, but the FCC permit says Starship Test Flight 5. There's no
Um,
integrated flight test or anything like it, and there hasn't been.
um, Anyway, I hear we have some replays. Let's see. Or maybe we're not quite showing them yet. There we go. Here are replays. Replay on the left, live shot on the right. Uh, do we know what camera? Yeah, this is Elisar, one of the SBL ops and handles a lot of social media stuff. I believe this was his track. Um, Paul with another $20 super chat saying, "Thanks for the show. It is our pleasure. Thank you very much for your support today, Paul, and hopefully we were able to somewhat answer your Starship question." There we have Falcon rising over the bushes. And this shot really is making it look like they just found a small gap between the clouds to go.
This is apparently auto track. Finally tracking the rocket and not a light. I wonder if it will work auto track um on those model rockets that we're covering from Spaceport America. Well,
Yeah, it
not
would be
model rockets,
interesting.
but you know what I mean, right? They're student rockets.
Yeah, substantially higher TWR. But as a reminder, there is one more burn left in today's mission. So at T plus 26 minutes is when we are expecting that burn to happen. And then payload deploy being at T plus 34 minutes and 48 seconds.
Yeah. Just nicely coasting through space. But there you can see, when there are clouds, it's true that you kind of lose the rocket in the clouds, but you get the sensation of that speed of how fast the rocket is going. And it's always cool.
Yeah, very true.
And I guess this is sort of the secret sauce of auto track, right? That it's still tracking while while it is behind a cloud. We're showing the secret sauce. Anyways.
um,
Is this
um,
the other KC camera? Yeah, I believe so, right? And up it goes. Bye, Falcon 9.
and then up next, I believe, saving the best for last is D's slow-mo footage of launch. Always,
Yeah.
always the cool, very cool. Oh, never mind. This is not D's slow-mo footage of launch. That's maybe Nexter. Apparently, there are a few more. Ignore me. There we go. Here was what we showed live. Um, I believe this was D's tracking. Yeah, this is D's tracking. And then there's a slow-mo version of this also to come.
Yeah, this is the known slow-mo. This is just Mo.
This is indeed the motion. Then pay attention at about a minute into this video, there was a very noticeable vapor cone on today's mission as the vehicle is in those transonic regions. Yep, there it was.
It just looks like it's standing there, like it's hovering, right?
It really does.
But yeah, there was a little bit of a vapor cone there.
Yeah, the clouds do really make it look stationary, which is cool. And here is this. Oh, this is still motion. Never mind.
Yeah, this is still just mo, not slow mo. But it's a wider view of the liftoff. It clears the pad really quickly. Oh, is that
I
audio?
can't wait for. That is audio.
Hmm, that's interesting.
I think this is the pack that normally Max would be tracking from, but of course, Max is a couple thousand miles away from this launch, so couldn't track. Let's see, which view is this? This
This
looks
is the
like
slow mo.
very, very slow-mo.
Okay, yeah,
Yeah,
this
this
one is
looks
the
like
slow mo.
slow-mo. This
Look
is
at that.
Dee's awesome slow motion footage. Man,
You can see one of the umbilicals pulling out on the
yeah.
stromback. It's threading the needle. See between the cables on the lightning towers.
Oh,
Oh
and
hey,
there's Dee. That's a cool shot. And then this should be maybe this may be where the vapor cone is visible. I'm not
oh look
sure.
at that.
Ah, right through the clouds.
Look at the Merlin engine exhaust there. Even when it is a slow mo, it's still fast.
Yeah, that is cool. Then
Oh,
coming up,
maybe this one is the vapor cone.
yeah, I think this is the vapor cone. So pay attention to around the fairing
Ooh,
of
look
the
at that.
vehicle. And yep, there it is. You can see that vapor cone forming and then disappearing. Very nice. And this, of course, coming from D. So thank you, D, as always, for being out in the field, tracking the vehicle, and getting us this awesome footage. And as another reminder, on the right, you can see SpaceX's view, where they've just reached 26 minutes past launch. So they are now preparing the engine for reignition, which will happen at T plus 26 minutes and 36 seconds. So you can kind of see some of those propellant settling, thrusters firing, as well as the uh, engine will currently be in chill down mode for the same reasons they do ahead of launch. They'll do it now. So
Yeah.
that burn again is expected to last about a minute. Um, and then they will coast again before payload deploy. standing by any second now.
There's the relay. Look at the speed going up. This is about a minute long, this burn, because they need to get to the velocity to get to geostationary transfer orbit, or geosynchronous transfer orbit, I should say.
Yeah, very different from the Starlink burns that we see where the
Yeah.
second burn is like a second long.
Yeah, it's like 1 or 2 seconds at most. Yeah. Blink and you
Yeah,
miss it, essentially. This one is a little bit longer, yeah. Well, a little bit. Much longer.
yeah.
Should be about 35 kilometers per hour, but if they get a little bit more, that's usually much better. There we go.
A little bit more than 35 kilometers per hour,
There we
like
go.
35,000.
Oh,
And there
excuse me.
we
I
have
was,
it. So
yeah,
now
I
you
was
can
saying
see,
35,000.
yeah, yeah. And so now you can see the speed is starting to decrease since it is going uphill, if you will. The altitude is increasing, which means that energy is coming from the velocity. So it's just like, someone on a roller coaster uh, transitioning potential or kinetic energy into potential energy. Um, That is the last burn the second stage will do today. Again, payload deploy will occur, and then the payload will begin raising its own orbit up to that 35-ish thousand kilometer circular orbit. That is geostationary orbit. Um, yeah, awesome shots as always from SpaceX. Let's see. So, just to recap today's mission, we had a successful liftoff about half an hour ago. Uh, Successful booster landing of B-1080 on Just Read the Instructions, and now a successful SECO 2 after SES-2. Um, Payload deploy will occur in about 5 minutes. So, Alex, going back to some more questions for you.
Yeah, let's hit
Um,
some.
Yeah, here's one. If we remove all the Starlink launches by SpaceX, how much has their cadence increased in the last few years?
It has increased quite decently. If you only take customer launches and non-Starlink missions, you essentially you remove all of the Starlink missions. It still has increased quite a lot. Last year they had 33 customer launches, which nobody else, um, you know, even if you count, I guess, Russia and China, if you sort of remove the launches that are not their own launches, so to speak, right? That will still be a record of launches for non-internal launches. That is a lot of launches for just missions that are not their own. And this year they were on track for 50, but some of the payloads have delayed. So maybe they hit 40, but it's not their fault, right? Most of the time, when they, with this amazing launch capacity that they have, right now it's just down to those customers being ready to launch and having their satellites ready. And so right now they're just waiting on that, on the customers being ready. And so if they don't hit 50, it's just because of that, because of those payloads not being ready and delaying to next year. But next year they also have a really long list of payloads as well to launch. So yeah, it's not like there's a shortage of payloads to launch or anything.
Right. And it has been interesting that, right, generally about a third of SpaceX's launches in a year will be for external customers. So right, this year, as Alex was saying, they're on track for 40 to 50, somewhere in there, and they're on track for 130 to 140-ish launches, somewhere in there. So right about a third. Same with last year, where what I think they had 31 or 32 customer missions and they had 96 launches. So again, about a third. And so the fraction has been about the same. Um, So even though they're launching way more Starlink missions, they're also launching substantially more customer missions. Another question, any updates on SpaceX's progress with the extended fairings and the vertical integration facility that they talked about building at 39A?
Well, other than the picture that we saw about a year ago, we really haven't had any updates on the extended fairing. And then the vertical integration facility, I don't think they will build it unless they have a need to use it. Right now, I don't think there's any mission that needs to use it, so we'll see.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see if they actually end up building it, because there definitely seems like a possibility that they would just give the missions that require vertical integration to ULA and then not make SpaceX build that um,
Hmm.
building, but we'll see. Um, Adam's wondering, how is the ship slowing down in space? Is SpaceX using thrusters to slow it down? No. So this is just, as you can see, the altitude is rising. Uh, so to get energy to increase its altitude is taking that from its kinetic energy, um, and once it reaches its apogee, um, the highest point, then the velocity will start increasing again as it falls back down closer to the Earth, and it'll stay in that elliptical pattern, uh,
Yeah.
slowly raising its orbit. So that's just gravity working.
Yeah, you can imagine the same thing, for example, if you flip a bottle or something like that, right? And when it goes up, it reaches a highest point, and at the highest point, it's obviously not going up anymore. So it's sort of like at velocity zero, and then it speeds up again as it falls back down. So the same thing, it's the same principle, it's gravity, right? In an orbit, when you go into that apogee, you get to slower and slower velocities. You get to zero unless you're in a very weird orbit or just going straight up and straight down. But if you're in this kind of orbit, you just slow down, but you still have some kind of horizontal component to that velocity. That's why it doesn't reach speed zero. But yeah, it's the same principle. That's why it's slowing down. It's just because the gravity is just pulling down on the vehicle as it coasts up to apogee.
Yep. But any second now, we should be coming up on that payload deploy. So pay attention to this view. We're currently kind of looking at the bottom of the satellite from, I imagine this camera is located roughly near the uh, payload ring. So that will separate, and then again, there will be no deorbit burn or anything of the second stage today. Um,
And it looks like the deployment has occurred. It appears that the camera was not able to look at the satellite being deployed, unfortunately, but they have confirmed through the nets that the satellite has deployed. It appears that this is like covered in some kind of mylar or something like that. I'm not fully sure where or how this got like this, but well, it's unfortunate. But it did deploy. They have sensors and multiple different ways of actually knowing that the satellite deployed, and they were able to confirm that indeed the satellite has deployed. So mission
awesome.
success for Falcon 9 once again. No surprises
Yep.
here, right?
And there's confirmation from SpaceX on X with the successful return of the Cape after a whole 12 days without launches, which really did feel like an eternity. But with that, that's going to do it for us here at NSF. I want to thank everyone for joining and also thank people who were on stream with me today. Alex, thank you very much as always.
It's been a pleasure, and hopefully we get to see another launch, maybe Sunday, Saturday. I don't remember right now. On the 23rd. I don't remember if it is Sunday or Saturday anymore. It's been a long week.
Right. Then out in the field, we had Julia, who, again, sorry about her signal. That was, she feels bad. it's always hard getting good reception out there. So thank you, Julia, for trying, and the little bit you were on, we really appreciate it. Then out in the field, we also had Dee bringing us the awesome live views. So thank you, Dee. And then in the background, Carson was operating today's stream. So thank you to Carson as well. Then, of course, thank you everyone for being here today, for those who supported, those who liked, and those who were just here to watch. But that's going to do it for us. I've been your host, Trevor Sesnick. See you next time.
And here we go.
We have liftoff.
Propulsion continues to be nominal.
RS-68 chamber pressure looks good.
Doubling up. Roger, planet.
Water towers fly! Tango down to nominal.
Fighting downside SPD off. Bring in SPD off. Off. It's orange!
Oh my god! Oh my god!
Decollage.
Put that in the big bag, Signal.
343 unfolds to go.
Indeed.
We rise together back to the moon and beyond.
This methane will be igniting in the flare, correct?